that's pretty cool. Echo Form's dope. Expensive though. Game 13, Jane, that's pretty. Oh my lord.
Did it.
And this is the one. This is what I was talking about. Yeah, I kill all of them. I'm on the top one. Yeah,
Do I have to do anything? Oh.
I honestly don't know how to fucking build the first guy. Ironclad.
This guy?
Yeah, I just don't get it. I haven't seen enough of his powers to understand.
I had a pretty
What
good
to
run
do.
as him.
I know it's the strength
Earlier.
build would be insane because he has a lot of strength cards like that, but I just haven't played him enough. I haven't even tried her just because I wanted to see what happens when you get all three of those things. So I've tried to.
We have bosses to kill, Darren. We have people to shit on.
You have people to shit on. I don't know. What?
Only 17? Oh, I thought it said 17 of 77.
What are these? All achievements.
Those were achievements.
Heretics defeated. There's 5? Oh, do you think the guy that the last boss is a heretic we need to fight?
Wonder.
I think he is. Has to be.
JLab, go talk. Hello, I'm not a monkey, Brandon. Shut up and die. Get over here.
Okay.
I started the stream.
Okay.
Aqua. Oh,
Darren, you're either a cock muncher or a knock muncher.
neither.
You have to. I said you're either, bro. That means two. You have to be one.
Nope, I'm built different.
You're built like a Mexican.
Different.
That's not different.
Different.
Don't worry.
Pretty
bro.
good
That's-
opinion.
That's
You
their
won't sound
slaves
crazy.
or slaves' jobs. Huh?
Is
What'd you
that
say?
just because we've been leveling up a lot? It's all.
Get over here. Dang, dude. I'm already live. Get over here. Get over here. Sit down. It's uncomfortable for me. Brandon, I'm not letting you smash. Uncle Sigma. I want first person.
And then the table is
What?
Hands at the end of the table is up here.
Maybe you should not say that while I'm streaming. And maybe you should sit down. That'd be even cooler. You should find a couple of questions on like Reddit or something we can answer because ain't nobody gonna ask us questions. Well, I don't have an audience. Until people start joining, we're not gonna have anybody asking us questions too. No, never mind. You're good. My bad. My bad, mommy. My fault. I should. First question: how big is your penis? 2 centimeters and a half. Brandon, do you have any questions? Oh, hello, YouTube. I forgot you're here too. Uh-oh. Hey, that's not what cars do. That's not what cars do. That's not what cars do. Holy fuck. Stand, babe. This is really uncomfortable. Me mania.
I'm trying to get comfortable.
What is your leg doing?
Fucking.
We're doing a Q&A. So you either ask me questions or ask her questions or both. That's nasty. How am I supposed to put the controller here?
I didn't know me having my stuff there. Fuck.
Yes. Do it jiggle. My balls or my ass? Because both.
I could read him the asshole stories.
That's the last thing I really want. Not gonna lie to you. Not for me. Plus, I already named it Q&A. Dude, stank very.
Why would. Respectfully, why would anybody ask questions?
Disrespectful. Why would anybody care about? Am I the asshole?
Like, that's like,
No.
we're gonna ask questions about.
No, that's why you pull up questions, babe. Your little brain can't wrap your head around it, but come on now. Reddit exists. I mean, if you... Reddit's a maybe. Oh, if only we had the speaker in here. I have those speakers, but I don't know how the audio will fare if I use them. Because I could just play it in my asses.
I read it.
Your voice constantly for a really long time? Okay. At least until somebody comes in and goes, "Oh, baby, you know what I want, let me give it to you, let me give it all. Let me give it to you, give it to you. I'm up. I'm down. Which one was Franklin's house? From Gore. This one, guys, look, it's Franklin Roosevelt's house, guys. It's Franklin's. It's Franklin's house. Can also go live on TikTok. You know where my phone's at. Phone's out really low. And some douchebag. You're a piece of shit and you should die. I hope your mom ends up like mine.
Am I the asshole for yelling at my mom?
Oh no, my headphones are on. Just kidding. I can't relate to any mom stories.
Am I the asshole for resting?
I don't know if you should read, babe. Seem to be having an issue.
I'm just trying to find one where.
Please watch where you're going.
Please watch where you're going. Start this shit, homie. Start this shit. No, I did not switch to that. How does it think I switched to guns when I don't? It's wild.
What's up? You need me to watch your dog or something?
Running the wrong guy.
Come on, dog. I love killers. Fuck yeah, dog.
Am I the asshole for killing my
Somebody's
brother's
hit.
plans?
Ayúdale.
I don't know what you're saying. How did they all kill me all at once? That's crazy.
Am I the asshole for telling
Yes.
my friend I don't like her going back to her ex?
Every friend ever.
So just for some context, my friend A and this boy B dated for quite some time before breaking up. It was A was really happy in the relationship, and she seemed like she really loved him. When they broke up, A was still very attached to him and loved him. However, B was with a different girl. C was pretty rude to A. She gave her rude looks, talked bad about her, etc. A and B would talk to each other. I'm not reading that. What fucking names? Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that sounds really boring.
Maybe.
Oh my god, it's so hard to aim on controller. Pute Madara. I think I just heard you're lucky I don't wipe my mouth. I need to turn off fucking the controller shit.
Am I the asshole for telling my wife the lock on my daughter's door does not get removed till my brother-in-law and his daughters are out of the house? What do you think?
Huh? I was not listening.
No point in me reading them if you're not listening.
Womp womp. Just kidding, go ahead. I'm still kind of just
What do you
listening.
think about that one?
Obviously, it sounds like the brother-in-law is probably a pedophile.
It says his daughters though too.
How would his daughters be the pedophile if they're his daughters? They're probably younger.
Well, they sound like they're a problem.
Problem, yeah.
My brother-in-law Sammy lost his home shortly after his divorce 10 months ago. He moved in with us and brought his twin daughters Olivia and Sloane, 18, with him. A couple of months ago,
We
my sister,
expect the unexpected. I'll look
his
into
sister, my wife, and I have one daughter, Zoe. And she and her cousins aren't close, but get along fine. Olivia and Sloane have no respect for Zoe's privacy. None. They used to walk into her room and take everything they get their hands on. Makeup, phone, accessories, clothes, school laptop, etc. Zoe complained a lot, and I've already asked the girls to respect Zoe's privacy and stop taking things. My wife and Sammy saw no issue with this.
You're through to
After
your
all, they're
garage.
girls,
You,
and this
need me to bring you a ride?
teenage girl behavior.
I'll bring it to you.
This is typical teenage girl behavior. I completely disagree. The last straw was when Zoe bought a $60 MAC makeup kit that looks like a paint set that she saved up for over a month, and one of the girls, Sloane, took it without permission and ruined it by mixing the shades together while using it. Don't know much about makeup, but that's what Zoe said when she found the kit on her bed and was crying. I told my wife, and she said she'd ask Sloane to apologize. But I got Zoe a lock after I found she was moving valuable belongings out of the house because of this incident. Sammy and his daughters saw the lock and weren't happy. The girls are extremely upset. Sammy asked about it, and I straight up told him. He said, my daughters aren't thieves. It's normal that girls of the same age borrow each other's stuff. He said Zoe could easily get another makeup kit for $15 from Walmart and shouldn't be buying expensive adult makeup in the first place, and suggested my wife take care of this defect in Zoe's personality, trying to appear older than she is. He accused me of being overprotective and babying Zoe with this level of enablement.
You're reading or?
Yeah. Well, I told him this is between me and my wife, but she shamed me for putting a lock on Zoe's door for her cousins to see and preventing them from spending time with her, saying I was supposed to treat them like daughters, then demanded I remove it. But I said this lock does not get removed till her brother and his daughters are out of our house. She got mad I was implying we kicked him out and said her family will hate us for this. So I reminded her that I let Sammy and his family move in, which something her own family refused to do. So she should start with shaming / blaming them for not taking their own son and nieces, granddaughters in. If it wasn't for her family's unwillingness to help, we wouldn't be dealing with this much disturbance at home. Everyone's been giving me and Zoe the silent treatment, and my wife is very much upset over this.
Is that it?
Mm-hmm.
That's it? Oh, that was boring.
I say what your opinion is, though.
That it was boring.
It was boring?
Yeah, there was no conclusion. There was no, like, you're right. I'm
Well,
different. I would have just straight up kicked him out. My dad's done the same thing to... So, okay. So my dad actually had people live with us before. On multiple occasions. And he was nice about it. But the thing is, they were all chaparral's friends and stuff. After he found any red flag from any of them, he kicked them out immediately. I'd do the same fucking thing. Somebody who's stealing from me, you're done. You're getting kicked out. I don't care. I'm not going to give them a second chance. $60 worth of like makeup or $60 of anything.
Well, it
Fucking
was a
ridiculous.
name brand makeup kit.
Exactly, name brand. If it was Jeffree Star or James Charles, I wouldn't give a shit. I'd destroy it my goddamn self.
But like,
But at the same time, if you come into my house, I offer you my kindness and you take my child's shit, you're out. You're done.
well,
And your
yeah.
dad, and there's no way I'll let your dad be as incompetent as that fucking guy in the story. If there was somebody fucking like that and they were fucking treating my family the same way and my wife was that stupid, all of them are out. They're all out.
Well, the thing is, like, the justification for his daughters taking the makeup kit was that she didn't need an adult makeup kit, even though
It's ridiculous.
yeah, his daughters fucking stole it, who were teenagers. She spent
They're
her-
18. They're adults. They should
Yeah.
know.
and she spent her own money on that. What
Exactly.
the
I would have been like, okay, you're either paying her back that 60 or I'm kicking you out.
fuck? Yeah.
And then I wait till they pay the 60 and then I kick them out anyways. Because it's fucking ridiculous.
Yeah.
I'm not going to live with somebody who can't appreciate what's around them or the kindness that we brought into their house. Adam, like when I had Adam living with me, he was appreciative. He was great. But if somebody lived with me and they were unappreciative, stealing shit, it's just like, no go. You're gone.
Yeah.
Fuck out of my house. It's like baking somebody a pie and then just bashing it into your fucking face. It's ridiculous.
There's another one. Am I the asshole for despising my mentally handicapped daughter?
Skip that one.
Am I
Too
the
relatable.
asshole for suing my girlfriend after she had a 1967 Impala project taken to the scrapyard?
Skip that one. That pissed me off.
Am I the asshole for wanting to go to the funeral of a girlfriend I helped get addicted to drugs?
Yes. Skip.
I feel like we should read it anyway.
I don't know. The fuck are my supplies still full?
Here.
Motherfucker. Motherfucker. Oi, 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 oi. That's my research.
Am I the asshole for pretending to get fired when customers get a temper with me?
I don't like these stories. They're just kind of boring.
Mm,
They all sound like really.
this one, I feel like this one had something to it.
What, the pretending to get fired? No.
No, the funeral, going to the funeral.
I feel like it wouldn't be that good. Like, oh yeah, I got her addicted to drugs and I went to her funeral. Just, it doesn't sound good. What? 45K. No, I'm not doing that.
Am I the asshole? Would I be the asshole if I took over planning my own funeral for my very religious parents?
What?
They're planning their own funeral, I guess?
No, that's normal. Would that not be normal? Should you not plan your own funeral before you die? Just tell everybody what you want? Just make sure you have somebody actually trustworthy to...
Am I the asshole for telling my extended family how many men my sister has slept with after she outed our youngest brother as a virgin?
That's funny, but that's common. Funny but average. My legs are fucking spicy. I gotta be a motorcycle club. Meow 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 meow. I am now president of Motorcycle Club. Waka 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 waka. Walk up on the blocker. Kinda wanna see your cock.
Am I the asshole for dropping our dinner on the ground and walking out when my boyfriend asked me what's for dinner, bitch?
These all sound so boring.
I know, what happened to like the good ones?
The only ones that are entertaining to me are kind of like the horror ones now. Those ones are.
Let's do that.
The horror ones. Do you want me to put it on the speaker so you just listen to it?
I can read it.
They're long. The ones I'm thinking of are long. I have speakers for a reason as well, babe.
Let me get the top.
See, look. 1, 2.
Can if you want.
I feel like it'd be easier to listen to. You wanna move your things real quick? Because I'm gonna have to use my keyboard and mouse. Ouch! Laptop? No. Okay, this is stuck on something. It was the chair. Good call, wife.
Controller.
Are you fucking serious?
What is that from?
I don't know.
Oh,
What the frick?
dude, we are not having any like luck with.
I'm not having any luck. There's a better way to say it.
Well, the one that was in my car.
Give me this, motherfucker. I just bought these speakers too, that really sucks.
Are they broken?
Hey, this is the only thing connected to it. Can it just work anyways? Wishful thinking. Oh. need tape. Don't worry, guys. We came in clutch. And you guys can come in me.
Can they hear?
Yeah,
You're like slowly.
I know. That's what kind of view close. Oh, that hurts. That hurts a lot. My leg. And this is my arm.
Shit. Okay.
Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to another Reddit Stories video, and today we will be covering unexplainable stories from Reddit. So this will just be a bunch of scary stories, and it'll be super interesting, and I've got a bunch of great stories lined up, so make sure you stick around, like and subscribe to the channel. The channel's goal is 500,000 subscribers before the end of the year, so please subscribe. And alright, anyways, this video is long enough already, so let's get into some unexplainable stories from Reddit.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
I'm a nurse for the elderly. One of the patients made a terrifying confession. Despite what some might tell you, it's not actually so bad to work in this field. Sure, some of the elderly can be difficult times, and like any other job, this one has its stomach-churning moments, but most of them are sweethearts. All it takes is some compassion and patience to break through to them. So yeah, I mostly love this job. I wouldn't give it up if I could help it. The only part I don't like are the occasional confessions from some of the patients.
You don't want them to have that
they
for
say
free?
that people can feel their ends nearing, and after a few years working this job, I've come to believe that. Some of them have no one else, no family or friends left, so they air their dirty laundry, so to say, in front of us nurses. Most of the time it's pretty mild stuff. Old Gregory cheated on his wife in their 30s, Larry used to be into hardcore BDSM, Lisa stole from her company for a while. Stuff you don't necessarily expect, but that doesn't surprise you in hindsight. Other times it borders on disturbing. Jenkins had a bar fight and ran away, and to this day he's not sure if the other guy survived. Sasha had an abortion on her own, without telling her boyfriend at the time that she was even pregnant. Sierra abandoned her family, running away in the night to start a new life, and seeing the missing posters ate her up inside. That's the kind of stuff that gets under my skin, but I can at least understand where they're coming from. I can sympathize, even if I don't condone their actions. But then there are the monsters, the ones that have completely, truly atrocious deeds, and their confessions keep me up at night. Julia, the sweetest old lady you'd ever meet, gaslit her husband into S-word to cash out his life insurance. Freddie helped burn an entire village back in the Vietnam War, basking in the flames and the screams of the dying. Sally abused her child growing up, to the point it would cause a myriad of developmental problems. Mind you, I haven't been there myself for all of those confessions. Us nurses tend to share, morbid as it might sound. Go ahead and judge if you want, but we don't ask for those burdens to be placed on our shoulders, and we'll seek relief wherever we can find it. Most of the time it's just innocent gossip. The "you won't believe what Gus used to do when he was his young" type. Other times there are tears and silent cries in the break room, stone cold expressions and a pressing atmosphere, not a hint of levity to go around. But such is life in this field. Most of us have learned to live with it, and those who couldn't walked away. I myself am in the first camp, and I don't think last night will change my mind. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. You need some context in order to make heads or tails of this. It all started with Parker, so I should too. He's a bitter old man, no way to sugarcoat it. A tough nut to crack, rage and hatred for everyone and everything simmering under the surface at all times. He's the type of person that won't be satisfied until your parade is soaked to the bone in rain. He's been here since before I was hired, so the other nurses warned me about him from day one. God help you if you have to interact with him. He can ruin your entire week just by opening his mouth, they told me. I didn't take them seriously, thinking he couldn't be that bad. Spoiler alert, he was, but not in the ways you'd expect. He didn't get physically violent like some of the other elderly. He didn't fling shit and piss-soaked diapers at us. He flung words, but he knew how to make them cut, and cut deep. Our first interaction happened when I had to check up on him and make sure he took his medicine. It was a nice evening, and I found Old Man Parker in his room, lounging in his recliner. He faced towards the window, back to the door, and he didn't even bother around to look at me when I entered. "Good evening, Mr. Parker," I greeted. "Hey, fresh meat," he spat a response laced with spite. I gritted my teeth and tried to sound polite when I answered. "My name is Jessica, but..." "Fresh meat," he interrupted me. "You won't last a month, so I won't bother learning your name. Now why are you here, fresh meat?" I told him why, and he pointed at the empty pill bottle on the nightstand next to him. Then he returned to staring out the window at the sunset without another word, so I took my leave. This was how the first 3 weeks went by. I went over to his room for this or that. He made some snide remarks to insult me, and I held my tongue. It was clear he didn't want anyone around, especially me. But I was never a quitter, and I wasn't about to bend the knee to some old fart with a vendetta against happiness itself. "You still there?" he asked on the 4th week when I passed by his room to change his bedding. "My God, woman, you're about as smart as you're pretty." He was in his recliner again. Most of his evenings and nights were spent there, but by the day he'd be outside, or in the common area, terrorizing everyone he happened upon. But as soon as dusk approached, he'd retreat to his room and peer out the window until he fell asleep in the recliner. I ignored his remark, approaching the bed with a fresh set of sheets and pillowcases. "What? Did you swallow your tongue? Forget how words work?" He kept pestering me. I took off the old sheet and discarded it on the floor, even though it wasn't all that dirty. That wouldn't be a big surprise. Honestly, the only thing surprising me is that you learned to speak in the first place. Now, I don't recommend doing what I did, reacting like I had. At that point, I should have thrown in the towel and walked away, but I didn't. After 2 weeks of abuse like that on a daily, I snapped. I threw the fresh sheets haphazardly on the bed and stomped over to his recliner. "Listen here, you shriveled up ball sack," I went off on him. "I don't know what your problem is, but I don't need this kind of treatment in my life. I'm not surprised that your family left you. With an attitude like that, I'd have dropped you off at a care home first chance I got as well." I hurled insult after insult at him, digging deep to dredge out the nasty side of me, fully expecting Parker to go off on me in return, but instead he stood there and took it all. With each colorful word leaving my mouth, the corners of his lips pulled a little further up into a satisfied grin. I only stopped when I ran out of breath, and he waited a moment to make sure I was done. "What did you say your name was again?" he asked. "Jessica." "Jessica," he repeated, letting each letter roll off his tongue. "Tell you what, I like you." And that was that. He returned to staring out the window, and I was able to carry out my work in peace. I regretted the outburst for a while, feared that it would somehow come back to bite me in the ass and get me fired, but Parker didn't tell anyone. It was our little secret. Every day after that, he'd grin when he saw me. He still gave me lip, but it was different. More jovial. Not trying to insult me and drive me away, just to tease me. But I could work with him without breaking down into tears afterwards, so I took my win. After a while, I started teasing him back. He'd call me his insult of the day, I called him mine, we'd laugh it off and move on. What I'm trying to say is that we developed this weird bond, and I actually started having fun. I started looking forward to it. We didn't talk about anything else. I didn't know the first thing about him, and he didn't know the first thing about me, but in my eyes, that only added to the charm. Life moved on, and before I noticed, I'd been working there for years. Rumors about Parker abounded. Everyone had their theories and beliefs, but I couldn't confirm or deny any of them. The man was still as much of a mystery to me as he'd been on the first day. Then one day, about a month ago, things started to change. He'd make less comments, he spent more and more time in his room, isolating from everyone. Parker had always been very self-sufficient for someone his age, but he started needing help with things, and I could see it killed him on the inside. I didn't mind. This was what I was getting paid for. But the man had his pride. He refused to be seen by a medic and get treatment, so we all expected him to kick the bucket soon. a prospect that made him most everyone in that care home happy, but I for one dreaded it. Even so, I knew better than to try and talk to him about it. One evening before I went home, I checked on him. Parker was in his usual spot in the recliner, drapes drawn aside and window wide open. The sun was already gone, sunken below the horizon, painting it red as night creeped in. He didn't acknowledge my presence, not until I stopped next to him. "Hey Jessica," he greeted, his voice a low rumble. I nearly went for a "hey Fartbone," but the sound of my name and the way that he said it gave me pause. For the first time in the many years I'd known him, he sounded serious for once. A pit of dread formed in my stomach. "Everything all right, Mr. Parker?" His lips curled at the corners, pulling his gaunt face into a smile. A dry, raspy chuckle left his throat, but he let me a question linger in the air for a moment. "Going home for the night?" he asked. "Yes." "Could you stay just for a little while longer?" "Of course." I knew what this meant. Parker felt his time was coming, and he wanted someone next to him. I leaned in to take his hand into mine, but a bastard will be a bastard to the very end. He slapped my hand away, so we stood there in awkward silence, watching the night settle outside. "You're the closest things I have to a friend, Jessica," he said out of the blue. "The closest thing I have to a family." He let out another chuckle, but it sounded sad. God, I'm so pathetic. I put a hand on his shoulder, and this time he didn't slap it away. I had no idea what exactly to say. Parker wasn't one for sappy speeches, so in the end I went with the truth. Blunt as it was, I figured he'd appreciate my honesty opinion. "It's your fault for being a grumpy old fart. You could have had many friends here. So why?" "Do you have any plans tonight?" he asked, and I nodded a no. "Then, can I answer your question with a story?" "Sure." He shifted in the recliner, biding his time as he searched for the right words. I'd seen it all before in others. They think themselves ready to open up until the time comes to actually do it. With a sigh, he resigned himself to the situation and started speaking. Parker was born in a small town in the 1940s, right off the back of the Second World War. He had an older brother and a father, neither of which he remembers. The first died of some disease as a child, and the second got drafted and died overseas while Parker was still a baby. That left his mother alone to raise him. But they weren't the only ones struggling to make ends meet in the town. Most everyone else did too. Life back then was harsh, especially for isolated communities like theirs. But I had a decent enough childhood, Parker assured me. My mother did her best, working herself to the bone and going hungry most nights to make sure I wouldn't. He took a short pause, prying his gaze away from the window to make eye contact with me. I could tell he was uncomfortable. Dwelling on the past brought him a great deal of anguish, but he looked away from me after a long moment, back at the dark world outside, and continued speaking. Despite his mother's best efforts, his childhood was short-lived. Parker had to grow up fast to become dependable, to help around the house and find work. It wasn't that uncommon back then. Kids as young as 8 or 9 worked shoulder to shoulder with the adults. We didn't have much of a choice. Things such as getting an education or waiting until they were adults, those were little more than pipe dreams, but luckily Parker was big for someone his age. At only 10, he was taller and stronger than his 15-year-old friends. He could handle his manual labor, and having an extra set of hands to go around, a second breadwinner, did wonders for their household. "I still remember getting my first ever pay," he said with a sad smile. "A small sum, but I was proud. Mother wanted me to spend it on myself to get something nice, but I didn't. I bought a sack of flour for her to make bread out of, and I used the fabric to make myself a new pair of shorts. I'm so sorry," I stuttered. "Yeah, me too." The time went on. Parker kept working throughout the years, living life one day at a time. Trouble was never far off, but he faced it head on. The adults always tried to shortchange him for his work, and other kids tried to bully him out of his meager earnings regularly. The first time that happened, I came home empty-handed with a broken nose and a busted lip, he said bitterly. 5 of them ganged up on me. It was a dog-eat-dog world back then. When he was about 13 and his mother brought home a new man, Parker hoped for a change. A chance for him to have a father, a role model, someone to teach him how to be a man himself. He thought life would get easier. How wrong I was, he said. That man was an alcoholic abuser. Parker and his mother found out as much soon enough. Her sooner than him, but he saw the signs. Even though he still worked and brought his earnings home, food was suddenly in short supply. His mother always had bruises she tried to hide, and his stepfather was always drunk. When I returned home beaten up again by the older kids, I was hopeful for once. I thought he'd go out there and do something about it. And he didn't? I asked with hesitation. Parker huffed. He beat me up as well for being a sissy. In his own words, "Better not happen again, you hear me?" He said that the next time I come home empty-handed, he'd show me real hell. Why didn't you run away or get the authorities involved? Run away? Where to? Parker answered. The authorities didn't give a shit. He kept enduring the abuse for the sake of his mother. Couldn't leave her all alone with the stepfather. And it escalated gradually. Soon enough, his stepfather would take Parker's money outright, then he'd beat his mother out in the open. It wasn't long until he raised his hand at me, on the regular, Parker said, but it kept my mother safe, so I endured it. On the nights I'd get beaten up, she was safe. And those nights only got more common as time went on. At first, Parker would get beaten up for stepping in, taking the place of his mother, then he'd get beaten up for not bringing enough money home, and then for no reason at all. At some point, I couldn't take it anymore. I snapped, Parker admitted. The other kid stole my money again, and I was afraid to go home that night, afraid of what he'd do to me. So I ran off into the woods, looking for a place to sleep, and instead I found this old well. Old well? I asked, not sure what it had to do with anything up to that point. Old well, Parker confirmed. You know, a hole in the ground for people to get drinking water? Yeah, I know what a well is. At any rate, he found this old well, a dilapidated thing, long out of use and in serious disrepair. Parker nearly fell down into it when he leaned over the edge to peer down. He threw a pebble into it, and it never landed. Then he tried spitting into it and yelling down into the shaft. It echoed for a long time, much longer than it should have. Parker listened in awe as his own voice reverberated from the well for minutes on end, not getting any fainter, but awe inside. It gave him the idea. I didn't like the sound of that. I did end up returning home that night, Parker said. Found him beating up my mother since I wasn't there, and he chased me when he saw me. Parker led his stepfather out of the town and into the woods, farther away from civilization, deeper and deeper between the trees, until he heard the faint echo of the well still calling out. I hid nearby and kept quiet, he said, waited for him to find the well, and he did. He heard the echoes of my scream and thought I fell down into the damn thing trying to hide. The asshole laughed about it. His stepfather approached the well and leaned over the edge, still laughing. "Did you learn your lesson yet, you damn bastard?" Parker imitated him. Little did he know that I did. It just wasn't the lesson he wanted me to learn. Parker burst out from his hiding place while his stepfather was distracted and ran up at him. All it took was a single push, he said grimly. A single push. And he tumbled over the edge, fell into the abyss head first, screaming all the way to the bottom. From that day onward, the echo of his voice joined mine in that well. The authorities pretended to search for him for a few days, but no one truly gave a shit. He was just an alcoholic bastard, so everyone thought he'd gotten his comeuppance. That he died in a ditch somewhere, or he ran away in search of greener pastures and other people to terrorize. No one suspected us, Parker said. Not my mother, who was too weak to fight back, and they considered me just a kid. No way in their eyes for either one of us to kill an adult man. With him out of the picture, though, Parker's life improved somewhat. He still earned a pittance, and the other kids still bullied him, but at least he could rest easy in his own home. I went to that well every day at first, then every other day, then once a week at most, but the screams never stopped, day and night. They got fainter, barely a whisper in the wind, but I could still hear them. Didn't it scare you? It terrified me, Parker admitted, but I also saw the possibilities. That answer terrified me. I contemplated for a moment to call it a night to put an end to Parker's confession and leave, but I was also curious, for better or for worse. Next up were the kids that bullied me, Parker continued. It took me a long time to build up the courage to even consider it, but enough abuse will push reasonable men to do unreasonable actions. The gang was 5 members strong, their leader 19 years old and the youngest about Parker's age. The rest were all in between, starving street urchins. Parker called them, either orphans or with home lives similar to his own that pushed them to run away and brave the world. Except they were lazy, Parker said. They took the easy way out, stealing, conning, bullying other kids like they did to me. The community wasn't happy with them, but they never targeted adults, so they were tolerated until they beat up Parker for the 100th time and he decided he'd had enough. I only wanted to get rid of their leader, he said. Thought their little clique would break apart without him, but I couldn't separate them. Parker tried to challenge him to a one-on-one fight outside of town, but he came with the rest of his gang and he was pissed. You could see the bloodlust in his eyes from a mile away. I knew they'd give me hell like never before, so I had no choice. All 5 of them had to go. Parker ran away, and just like his stepfather, they chased him into the woods. He hid near the well again, and when they got closer to inspect the echoing voices, Parker repeated his earlier stunt. "I pushed the older boy first," he said, in a stone-cold voice. Then, before the others had a chance to wise up, I pushed the second oldest as well. The others were smaller, I could take them. They tried to run away, to escape with their lives, but I couldn't let them. Parker chased them down, and he caught up to the youngest first. He tripped the boy from behind and stomped on his knee to break it, then kept going. The second one he grabbed by the shoulders and swung into the tree head first, breaking his neck. I tackled the last one and got him into a chokehold. He kicked his legs, clawed at my arm, tried to bite me a few times. When he realized he couldn't break free, he started pleading, begging for his life. Told me he wouldn't speak a single word about what happened here. He begged like that all the way to the well, until his legs were over the edge. The boy with the broken neck followed, and the one with the broken leg dragged himself quite the distance by the time Parker got to him. But he went through with it, and that night, the well gained 5 more voices. Parker stopped his retelling for a moment and stared off into the distance. At first I thought he was either giving me a breather, a bit of time to process what I heard, or that he was searching for words. I looked outside as well, and the silhouette of a tree against the starry night sky shook in the distance. A reverberating scream followed. "We don't have much time left. I have to hurry up," Parker whispered. I was frozen by his side as he picked the story back up, in shock and fear, not knowing what was about to go down or what I should do. I'd witnessed a few confessions by that point, but none came even close to Parker's. He confessed to 6 murders in just as many minutes, and I was sure there'd be a few more by the time he'd be done with me. The guilt ate me up inside, he confessed. I went by the well every single day, fighting back the urge to jump into it myself. No one missed those kids, and no one in the community blamed Parker. He wasn't the only one getting bullied by them, and on some level, everyone was glad they were gone. One less problem in their lives. So they were happy to pretend the 5 ran off somewhere to carry out bigger heists. I was depressed for years because of it, but I kept telling myself that I had to do it, and my life was better now. Lies I only half believed. But they got me out of bed in the morning. Another tree shook outside, closer to us, but there wasn't a scream this time. Parker flinched visibly. Anyway, the years flew by. People kept leaving the small town, flocking to big cities in search of work. I was one of them. I found this wonderful girl, and I left with her. They took Parker's mother as well, and the 3 of them found work at some factory or another. And for a few years, he thought he'd left the small town and his horrible deeds behind. Until I started hearing screams in the night. Voices I recognized. I thought I was imagining it at first. I tried to convince myself it was nothing more than me just going insane with guilt. Another tree shook outside, followed by a howl. Let me guess. It was all too real. Parker nodded his head. My mother went missing one evening, and we never found her. The big city police took it a bit more seriously, but they couldn't dig up a single lead. No witnesses, no suspects, nothing. But Parker knew exactly where to find her, or what was left of her. After a long trip back to his hometown and a trek through the woods, his worst fears were confirmed. His mother's voice joined the torturous chorus in the well. I broke down right then and there. Cried in that forest by myself all night long. It was supposed to be me, not her. He returned home though, if only for the sake of his girlfriend and soon-to-be wife. She was pregnant. They'd soon have their first child, and Parker wanted a better life for them than he'd had growing up. He'd be there for his kids, there for his wife, there to make sure they'd be alright. They got married with little fanfare, a few friends and even fewer family members for a proper wedding, and their child was born a couple of months later. The most beautiful baby girl in the world, Parker explained with a glint in his eyes. Holding her, hearing her crying, it was all I ever wanted, enough to justify everything I'd done and been through in a heartbeat. Another tree shook outside, and something took contour in the underbrush at the edge of the property. I let out a yelp, and Parker reached for me. He grabbed my forearm and held me steady as I tried to back away. "We still have a few minutes," he said calmly. "And don't worry, it's not here for you. You're safe." He proceeded with the rest of his story, and I had to try my damned hardest to divide my attention between him and whatever was out there. I treasured every moment and with my wife and daughter, but you know how these things go. She grew up in a heartbeat. Before I realized it, she spoke her first words, took her first steps, moments I couldn't be prouder of as a father. The thing bellowed, a guttural sound that rattled my bones. Dying animal was my first thought. A coyote getting murdered or a fox going into heat. It took a step forward into the faint circle of light surrounding the care home, and I saw a human face. Then another one, and another one, contorted in agony and held together to form a gigantic head. Then that thing returned once more, Parker said, raising a hand to point at the advancing beast. More cries in the night, more screams and howls, and I knew what it wanted, but I couldn't let it have me or my family. Another step brought its neck and torso into view, pulsing muscles crisscrossing each other at random, skin stretched until it pulled taut, dozens of human arms jutting out of it in the most random places. Its myriad of eyes moved every which way, scanning, searching. I knew I had to do something before it was too late, to either get rid of it or appease it, and I knew what it wanted. "What?" I asked, stuttering and shaking with fear. "People. Bodies. Victims," Parker answered. "More of them." I opened up its appetite, and now it was hungry. If I didn't give it what it wanted, it would get itself. Take my world from me. I didn't want it to do it. I tried to talk myself out of it until the very last moment, but I was so pressed for time and worried sick for my family, so I went back to the town. For a moment, I wished my eyes could do the same thing the creatures did. I wanted to turn and look at Parker to see his face, but I didn't dare take my eyes off of it. Every last muscle in my body was clenched, holding me in place. I was barely able to breathe. It took another step forward, and all of those dead, beady eyes focused, every last one of them pinned on the window, on the room, on me and Parker. I kidnapped someone," Parker said, his voice fraying into a cry at the edges. "An older man living all by himself. I knew him, knew he'd been a widower for decades. He knew me. He barely fought back as I tied and gagged him. I expected him to lead as well like the kids had. I expected him to fight me, but the silence, it was worse somehow. Did he know about that thing?" I managed to push out a question. "What? No, of course not," Parker answered. "He was just old and frail. And he knew he couldn't do anything to stop me. Maybe he'd given up on life long ago, like I ended up doing. I don't know." The rest of the monster came into view as it advanced towards the open window, and there was so much more of it than I expected. So many legs moving haphazardly, slapping the lawn at awkward angles to pull the body along. It felt surreal, like the window was a screen and I was merely watching some cheap horror movie with even cheaper special effects. At night, I dragged the old man out of town and through the woods. I got him into the well, said a short prayer for his soul, and tipped him over the edge. He went down without a sound. The monster stopped a few feet away from the window and craned its head forward. By that point, I was pretty much useless, more of an ornament than an active participant. Parker let go of me and moved to get up, failing twice. His old bones were all out of strength. But he saw his determination. The third attempt saw him to his feet, even if a bit wobbly. "I returned to my wife and daughter after that," he said, taking a step towards the window, "and all was fine for a while. Seeing her smile growing up, having her by my side, it kept the guilt at bay. She was my world, and I was ready to do anything to keep my world from crumbling." The monster cooed. One of its many faces moved along its screen, pushing against the rest until it got to the forefront. A wide smile took over its lips, replacing the agonized expression. The next time the screams returned, I knew what I had to do. Knew what the rest of my life would be like, what sins I had to commit. Every few years I'd return to that cursed town, kidnap someone in the dead of night, and throw them into the well. The smile on the face of the forefront only grew wider, but the rest didn't match. They started whispering aggressively, the voices merging as they got louder. I kept at it until my daughter grew up, until she found a boy she wanted to marry and moved out, until everyone left that town behind, to be an empty shell for the force it would take. And I called it a job well done. I thought my daughter was safe and I could finally let the monster take me. That I'd finally atoned for all of my sins. Parker closed the gap to the window, and so did the monster. It pushed its many arms into the room, hands both big and small, grasping at the air as they tried to reach him. And what happened to her, I asked. The question felt strange coming up out of my throat and leaving my mouth, like it was uttered by someone a million miles away, completely detached from the situation. Parker extended one of his arms, but paused and turned to face me. "What do you think happened, Jessica?" he asked in a somber voice. "What do you think pushed me on the run for the rest of my life? It made me grow wary of approaching people and making friends." I held back the answer, if only because I had one more question. "Why tell me all of this?" Parker smirked, the same mischievous, shit-eating grin I'd gotten used to from him. "'Cause I'm a selfish old bastard," he said matter-of-factly. "I wanted at least one person to know and maybe miss me. Now you do." He took the final step that brought him within the monster's reach, and it got a hold of his arm with 100 fingers. The many eyes looked past Parker directly at me. "Thank you, Jessica," Parker said, his back to me. "You can leave now. That'd be the best." I didn't argue with him on that. I slowly walked backwards towards the door. My head was heavy, mind spinning, and my legs felt like unsteady stilts 100 feet long. But I did it. I reached the door, backed out into the corridor, and closed it gently. Parker watched me the whole time, a peaceful smile on his lips until the latch clicked. The rest of the night was a blur. I wandered to the break room with tears streaming down my face, but I didn't even realize I was crying until I tried to light a cigarette and a tear fell on it. My hand shook like an earthquake, as did the rest of me. I smoked about half the pack, waiting and praying for the thing to leave so I could too. A couple of hours later, I finally built up the courage to bolt it out of the care home into my car. I drove home in a haze, eyes starting at every little movement, and I didn't manage to sleep or wink until the break of dawn. But I returned to the care home for my next shift, looking like a ghost. Police were there, interrogating everyone about Parker's disappearance, and I lied to them. Couldn't possibly tell them the truth. Not when I didn't know where the damn thing well is. So yeah, I lied until they left me alone. I lied until they packed in their car and drove off. Everyone else is awfully happy that Parker is gone, and I stand out among them like a sore thumb. Sitting in his recliner, writhing as the sunset approaches, I realized he was right on both accounts. He was a selfish old bastard, and he left behind someone who misses him. Stay in your vehicle. Back in April of 2013, I went through something that I haven't been able to talk about. I was paid a significant amount of money to stay quiet, in return for signing a 10-year agreement to shut the hell up. Now that this time is up, I've considered my opinions. I could just let this go and never speak of it again. I won't gain anything from speaking out, and I got a lot to lose. But then again, this is just an anonymous post online. Words have less meaning that way. West Virginia. It was hotter than usual. Without a whiff of wind, I was coming home from a visit to my aunt. She'd broken her leg and couldn't leave the house. I was making my way back home, taking the I-64 out of Lewisburg. It started with the radio. It was playing that one Macklemore song I'd heard 100 times over. The sound was cutting in and out in a quick staccato. Then it disappeared completely. I could hear cars honking up front as the line began to form. There was a sway in the trees, as it was greater and greater pressure was being put on them. I could hear wind rushing against the left side of the car, focusing me to pull the other way to compensate. I closed the sunroof as a dust cloud blew past, staining the windshield. Then a rumble. It sounded like thunder, but from the ground, like a groaning below, growing louder and clearer by the second. As it reached its peak, I could see trees toppling over. A small Kia got pushed off balance and swerved off the road. As the sound died down, the road dissolved into chaos. Some were desperately changing lanes, others were stepping on the brakes. I got my door scraped as the car behind me sped past. The radio was playing an automated message, a local emergency alert referred to as a geological event. We were asked to turn off all air conditioning, slow down, and divert to the nearest exit. It repeated in a monotone voice. Geological event. No air conditioning. Slow down. Divert to nearest exit. Minutes passed. There was a line forming further down the road. Police officers blocking the lanes in all directions, leaving a highway exit as the only option. Some folks were trying to push past the barricades but were forced back at gunpoint. I could see some officers wearing gas masks and riot shields. We were waved in. I followed the exit and got directed to the right. There was an open field that was used as a sort of impromptu parking lot. Cars were being waved in and parked in a way that boxed us in, leaving no room for us to open our doors in either direction unless we got parked at the edge. 4 lines of cars with about 10 to 15 vehicles per line. Surplus vehicles were directed further down the road. The place was packed. I got stuck in the second row, about 6 cars in. Pretty much everyone around me were on their phones. I didn't have anyone to call, but there seemed to be an issue getting a signal through. The radio was still repeating the emergency message. Voices were getting louder. A man 2 cars to my left leaned out of a gap in the door, screaming at the officers to answer his question. They responded immediately with a warning shot straight into the air. "Stay in your vehicle," they screamed. "Lock your doors. I'm not telling you again." A couple of folks were filming, but there seemed to be trouble uploading. We were losing bandwidth. It didn't take long until phone signals were completely blocked. I think a video or 2 of that officer firing into the air made it online. They were patrolling back and forth. We were told to stay in our vehicle, with the windows up, doors closed and locked, engines off. I could hear people talking in their cars. Someone said there'd been a natural gas leak from a geological event, and that combustion engines could spark an explosion. Others were talking about a terrorist attack, but there was no answers, and the officers weren't eager to talk. After about an hour, things were getting ugly. People were hungry, thirsty, and restless. One officer stepped up on the front of the cars, handing out water bottles, crackers, and processed cheese slices. He had to step from one car to another, denting the hoods with his steel-tipped shoes. They were also handing out thick black plastic hygiene bags for people who needed to relieve themselves. Use them, seal them, drop them out the door, then lock up and wait. I'd crawled into the back seat, pulled down my cap, and tried to relax. I've been playing some games on my phone, but the battery was running low. I wanted to save some, so I settled for having a nap instead. The sweat was stinging my eyes, not because of how warm it was, but because of how nervous I was. No matter what I did, I felt trapped, and the car felt smaller and smaller. I couldn't get out if I wanted to, and it physically hurt me to think about how little control I had. Is that what claustrophobia feels like? A couple of officers were discussing something by the front line. One of them had a white cotton glove on, which he used to wipe off the hood of one of the front cars. The glove was taken off and put into a bag, which in turn was sealed with a hot air gun. I was getting the impression that our cars had been covered in something. I wasn't the only one considering it. There were 2 college kids in the car to my left, and they were discussing it too. "Anthrax," one of them said. "Gotta be." "Nah, gold dust," the other chuckled. "They don't want to share." "You know what?" the first groaned. "I honest to God hope you're right." "You're not, but I hope you are." "Fuck you." I joined in the conversation shortly after. I offered another explanation, something combustible, something that might blow up if we started our cars. They were willing to consider this. The car behind me couldn't hear us, but the driver held up a notebook with the text, "If we don't know what, it's gotta be aliens." I couldn't tell if they were being serious, but they weren't laughing about it. A man in his 50s and what looked like his daughter. There were a couple of other folks in their cars. A man in a black shirt, who sort of looked like a preacher without a collar. 2 middle-aged women with a kid in the back seat. A fat man blaring Johnny Cash from a stereo. A couple with a teenage son who couldn't stop drumming on the windows. We'd been stuck for about 2, maybe 2.5 hours when a truck rolled in. One of those with a large water tank. It was unmarked, looked civilian. As it rolled in, they were calling out on the megaphone. "We'll be hosing your vehicles down," they said. "Keep everything locked and closed. Then we'll be covering your vehicle with protective plastic while we wait for it to dry. After that, we'll start letting you go in an orderly manner. I repeat. Most of us were relieved. It was only a matter of time now. It was getting dark. They were getting up on their cars, hosing them down thoroughly. It smelled of chlorine, so maybe they mixed something to the water. As they came to my car, they stepped up on it and double-checked the sunroof, making sure it was locked and secured. They sprayed the car down, bathing it in a chemical stink, the kind that gets stuck in the back of your throat. It took a long time for them to finish, at least an hour or two. After that, they were rolling out a kind of plastic cover at the short side of the lot, the kind you use to protect pools or rain covers for football fields. They used 2 squad cars to slowly drape the thing over the entire lot, securing the edges with large rocks. "Please stay calm," they called out as the plastic crawled over us. "I know this is uncomfortable, but this is for your own safety. Once the cleaning is done, you will be free to go. Stay inside your vehicle at all times. I repeat." I did as I was told. I stayed inside, and I watched that plastic cover swoop over me. It felt like getting buried alive. All lights went out, leaving me in complete darkness, accompanied only by the vague, disembodied voices of the others. The college kids were talking about where they were going to go after this. Someone was honking, not sure if it was to show support or discontent. Someone else was cheering. I took my last swig of water, washing down my final plain cracker. I got back in the driver's seat. I could hear as they finished moving the plastic cover and parking their squad vehicles. I waited patiently, figuring it'd be maybe another hour or so. They hadn't really given us a timeline, but I could breathe a little easier. Sort of. I was going back and forth between feeling empowered with my hands on the wheel and feeling like I was stuck in a metal coffin. It was so dark and everything smelled of plastic and chemicals, like a car wash stuck in time. As the excitement died down, I paid more attention to the background sounds. I tried to filter out the various discussions from the nearby cars, and somewhere in the distance, I heard raised voices. It wasn't coming from the cars, but the officers. Whatever they were talking about, it was a heated discussion. An hour came and went, and people were getting impatient. More cars were honking, others were yelling, demanding answers. I couldn't get my leg to stop shaking. The more I thought about getting out of here, the smaller the car felt. I was hyper-focusing on things I couldn't control. I was a little thirsty and I was out of water. I needed to use the bathroom. I wanted to stretch my legs and go for a walk. I wanted to breathe fresh air and get that awful chemical taste out of my mouth. I heard cars starting, accelerating. The truck was moving, somewhere off to the side. "We need you to stay in your vehicle," a voice screamed over the megaphone. "Do not leave for any reason. Stay in your vehicle." Cars speeding off, not many but a couple, then quiet. The officers left us there. Everyone was quiet. A couple of folks had opened up their phones, using them as a flashlight to look from car to car, looking out at the sea of vehicles. All of us trapped under that dark cover. I could see a handful of lights cut off by the sharp silhouettes. I couldn't make out who was in the dark. It was just all people, anonymous. I heard a gasp somewhere in the back. There was a metallic clunk, like when the officers climbed to top our cars to get us our waters. There was a careful cheer as some folks figured they were taking off the plastic cover, but that wasn't it. Instead, there were more footsteps. The cheer slowly died down as more and more footsteps pattered across our cars. I stopped counting after a dozen. The silhouettes in the other cars were still. We all held our breaths, waiting for an answer to show itself. What the hell was going on? What was that sound? Somewhere off to my right, I heard a voice. "Who's up there?" It sounded like an older man. I had seen a pickup truck that way earlier. Almost as a response, the footsteps stopped. There was a faint clicking sound, like someone snapping their tongue against the roof of their mouth. Click, click, and from further away, a click in response. From somewhere to my left, another couple clicks. Then a cascade of clicks, dozens, maybe hundreds. There was an awful metallic noise coming from my right, then breaking glass, a scream cut short, followed by several irregular taps of the car horn. One of the silhouettes in the distance turned into a blur as something passed through the windshield, cutting through the plastic cover. Somewhere in the front row, the roof of a car was cut wide open. Someone was pulled up out of their seat. 2 cars back from where I was, there was more glass breaking. It sounded like a wild animal got in. I could see a weak hint of a red splattered against the passenger side windows. I wasn't getting any air. I could feel my heart beating through my chest as my arms started shaking. My hands were cramped around the steering wheel, and I felt sweat dripping down from my shoulders. I couldn't control it. I didn't even see what was going on, but these sounds, these screams, they awakened something primal. This was danger, a threat. My body knew long before I did. The college kids in the other car were ducking down. One of them waved a hand at me as if telling me to get down. I nodded. I scrambled into the back seat. I couldn't see where I was putting my hands or my feet. Everything is different in the dark. As I tumbled my way over, my foot accidentally tapped the car horn. It was a quick tap, a fraction of a second, but to me, it was the loudest sound in the world. I was lying on my stomach in the back seat, and within seconds, something heavy climbed onto the hood of the car. I could feel my car buckling. It was much heavier than the man who passed out water bottles. I held my hands in front of my mouth to stop the panting, but I just ended up snorting up sweat instead. My nose stung as I bit my tongue, listening to every metallic groan as whatever was outside moved and shifted. Click, click, and from behind my car a click in response. There were no lights being held up anymore. Everyone was cowering, going quiet. I pushed myself up against the door behind the driver's seat, trying to make myself as small as possible. I could hear the frame of the car complain as something slowly moved. When it came to my sunroof, there was a slight crack. They made it stop. Another crack. I silently shook my head as if trying to ask the car to stop. That thing was going to break, and it did. My legs were showered with glass as a big blob of plastic cover dipped into my car. Something big came tumbling into the front seat. Still covered in protective plastic, it twitched and spun around, its clicking turning from a careful question-like noise to a never-ending barrage. It was calling for help, alerting others, and it was cutting its way through the plastic. There were footsteps coming from every direction, some of them leaping from car to car, some of them leaping far enough to skip a car as they hurried. I was going to be swarmed within seconds. I fumbled with my hands, accidentally cutting my thumb on the broken glass. I managed to open the passenger side door, but even at its widest, and even when pressing into the college kid's car, there wasn't enough room to get out. Still, I had to try. I pressed myself into the gap and exhaled as much as I could, flattening my chest. While the thing thrashed around inside my car, I could feel my vision going faint. Black spots popped up at the edge of my vision. My arms were going weak, and yet, by some miracle, I made it through. As my face hit the gravel of this makeshift parking lot, I felt the burn of residual chemicals. I swallowed my instinct to run, instead staying on my stomach, forcing myself to crawl under my car. There were more of them, some climbing on, some off. My chest was pressed to the ground as my weight shifted. I heard breaking glass from the windshield and tearing fabric. Something was up there, and it was furious, like a trapped animal. I could hear the college kids mumbling to one another, trying to stay calm. One assuring the other that all they had to do was stay low, stay quiet, and wait. Then something slammed into the passenger side door, the one I'd crawled out of. The door was pressed up against the neighboring car, then fell haphazardly to the ground, completely off the hinges. An ink-black, bird-like foot touched the ground right next to me. I've looked it up since. There were 3 toes forward, 1 toe backward, all clawed. Anisodactyl feet, similar to that of many birds of prey, except larger than a human foot and with smooth, oil-slick skin. It must have been heavy, at least 400 pounds. If the clicking noise came from its mouth, I can approximate that it was somewhere around 6'7" to 6'9", or taller. It could have been hunched over. How it managed to walk in the gap between the vehicles is beyond me, but I suspect it was very thin. It daintily walked from my car to the others, as if scanning for something. I could barely see anything in the dark, but this thing seemed to navigate it perfectly. It didn't bump into anything. There was a tap on the glass of the car behind me, to my right, and someone got startled. A short scream and the hunt was on. This time was different. It must have caused some kind of chain reaction, as all of a sudden the plastic cover was getting torn up left and right. People were clawing their way out of their cars.
1 second.
I heard someone kicking against their windshield. Another was trying to open their door. I could hear it slamming against the side of the car next to them, and off in the distance there was gunfire. Just a couple of shots. The college kids in the car next to me slammed their doors open and followed my lead. They rolled onto the ground and under their car. There was little more light coming in as the cover had been torn above. Their faces were red from tears, and one of them was desperately trying to call for help on his phone. The other grabbed the phone out of his hand. A short scuffle ensued, ending with them putting...
One second, guys. For some reason, it decided to go to this.
You're gone. I could hear the grinding as a seat was ripped in two and thrown away. In a matter of seconds, an entire vehicle was torn in pieces as a dozen of these things swarmed it. "Shut up," one of the college kids repeated. "Shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up." Something reached under my car. It scraped against the sole of my shoe, tearing a hole all the way to my big toe. I hurried forward, scurrying like a lizard. The college kids noticed and followed suit. I don't think they'd thought about it too much. It was just movement, and they went for it. I made it 2 cars down before I got stuck. There was something dark in the way, and I couldn't get around it without exposing myself. I couldn't see what it was, but it didn't take long for me to figure it out. There was a meaty crunch, as if someone was biting chunks out of a piece of meat. It was struggling to get through the fabric of their clothes, making a snapping noise as threads gave way. A pool of blood rolled under the car, staining the tip of my fingers. It was still warm. One of those things were eating a victim. I hungered down, trying to remember to breathe, and I stayed there waiting for a chance. Any chance. I must have stayed there for at least an hour, hearing every bite, every crack of bone and snap of sinew, satisfied clicking noises. As it finished its meal, it wandered off, dragging the remains along. They were moving forward. Something heavy walked over to the car I was hiding under, dragging a body along. Slowly, the footsteps disappeared. It was quiet again, and in that quiet, I found my footing. I made my way to the edge of the plastic cover. I listened one final time, pushed one of the weights away, and slipped through. They were gone, and I was out. I could feel my chest growing lighter, allowing me to breathe. I wanted to cry from relief. A breeze was picking up, drying the sweat on my brow and carrying the smell of grass. Stepping back, I turned towards the sea of cars to see how bad the damage was, and then I saw one. It was a bit off to the side, perching on top of an old Honda. At a glance, it looked like a tall person, covered in a slick black ink. But looking closer, you could see the strange bird-like feet, the pointed nails, the long row of shark-like teeth on its mouth that was far too wide. I froze. The thing rose to its full length, easily over 7 feet tall. It looked ready to pounce on me. I had nothing to defend myself with. I couldn't make any sudden movements. I wouldn't even be halfway under the car before the thing would be over me. 100 thoughts raced through my mind, but there was nothing I could do. I was out of options, but the thing just looked at me. It raised a slice of raw meat. Blood dripped onto the plastic cover. It looked at me curiously, taking a bite. Then, as if nothing had happened, it wandered off, satiated. I was left there, shaking like a dry leaf. And with the last of those things gone, all that was left was the panic. It didn't take long for the officers to return. The plastic cover was removed, but we couldn't go home. Not after this. Some folks signed a waiver and were let go immediately. They weren't allowed to talk about what they'd seen, and in return, they could get a hefty sum of insurance money. Others demanded answers and were taken into custody for obstruction of justice. A few others still were too panicked to make any kind of sense and had to be checked out from medical personnel. A total of 14 people died. It was described by a combination of causes: a traffic pileup, carbon monoxide poisoning, animal attack. I think there was something about an escaped convict too. Excuses all over the place, and the times are all wrong, spread out through a couple of days to more smoothly blend into accident statistics. And if you wanted to go home and get your insurance money, you had to sign a non-disclosure. I did too. I know the college kids did as well. Goddamn miracle they made it out, but I saw them. 34 cars had to be towed, 18 people wounded, 6 seriously so. 4 people lost at least one limb. One guy had an arm ripped off halfway up his collarbone. I don't know how he survived. Most people never saw those things up close. They just remember the screams and the breaking glass. Sometimes at night, that's all I hear too. Closing my eyes reminds me of lying under those cars, feeling the pressure as the weight shifted.
You're a dumb bitch.
I still get trouble
breathing.
Fuck
you!
I think a part of me is still stuck there. It stayed in my vehicle. They gave me pills to stop the hallucinations, but only 2 of my 3 friends went away. Pop culture is the graveyard of words. Original meanings are lost when language
Suck
is
my fat cock,
creatively,
Brandon.
yet destructively. Of course, there's only really a problem when significant words are rendered meaningless. when, for instance, illnesses become adjectives, when a person is just a little OCD, depressed, bipolar, psychotic. And that final word is one I used recklessly in my adolescence, but its true meaning became awfully apparent when my very perception of reality unwound, when I became unbound. The onset of my psychosis was unbearable. I was scared, confused, alone. Developing imaginary friends is endearing at the age of 8, but worrisome at the age of 18. I knew that. It's why I didn't let my loved ones know about my sickness. Of course, they noticed my change in demeanor, my general mental deterioration. However, given the recent death of my father, this erratic behavior was tied to grief. The root cause was overlooked. I hid as many symptoms as possible, made sure that my real friends didn't know about my imaginary ones, didn't know about my all-knowing companions who, peculiarly, appeared wherever I went. I was lucid enough to realize that they weren't real, lucid enough to realize that none of it was healthy. First came Grant, then Shirley, then Albert. These three friends weren't always present, but one or more of them would typically be a stone's throw away. It took very little time for me to realize that these imaginary friends were amalgamations of real people from my life. Grant reminded me of my late father, who was gentle but firm, grounded, trustworthy. Shirley reminded me of my late grandmother, a little lost in the clouds, but warm and wise, boundlessly wise. Her keen intellect compensated for her lack of common sense. Albert, however, was the anomaly. The Wally I never missed, despite my best efforts. To say that he unsettled me would not be doing the feeling justice, but I tried desperately to dispel the ache in my stomach. I told myself that Albert, like the others, must simply be a collage of faces and words that have shaped my life. I would have told myself anything to dislodge the lump in my throat, the one that bobbed to the surface whenever Albert entered the room. It always threatened to take the wind from my lungs, and I believed I would wake in the dark place Albert inhabited when he wasn't watching me. It was a false belief, of course. Albert was always watching. Earlier this year, there came the inevitable nervous breakdown. After 6 years of suppressing a steady stream of emotions, the dam burst. I lost my job. That was the trigger to